And now we have to understand what are PIWI varieties. PIWI is short for pilzwiderstandsfähig, so a German term, which translates best to fungi or, let's say, disease resistant. Basically, PIWIs are sort of the new crossings. And now I'm using a term that is very difficult to use because PIWIs are not crossings. They are technically seen hybrids, but I would first and foremost like to introduce you to the concept of crossings. Sometimes these processes happen totally natural. If we look at Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, very important, very famous red grape variety. Cabernet Sauvignon is the crossing result and the spontaneous crossing result originating at some point of time in Bordeaux of two grape varieties that we also know very well. On the one side, Cabernet Franc, a red wine variety, and on the other side, Sauvignon Blanc. So those two grape varieties at some point of time decided spontaneously in the field, okay, let's do a cross, and then Cabernet Sauvignon came out of it, and then after some rounds of mutations probably, we had some, let's say, very, very stable result of that could be cultivated around the world. And probably no human has been involved here. But we could, of course, also control this process and say in the laboratory, okay, let's take two grape varieties, let's cross them and create some new grape varieties with, so to say, different purposes in mind. Now, if we take two grape varieties that are part of the species Vitis vinifera, which basically could most easily translate it to the European grape varieties. If we think about the big ones, Riesling, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, they all belong to the Vitis vinifera category. If we cross two Vitis vinifera species wines, then we get a new Vitis vinifera wine and we call it for a crossing. This is not what PIWIs are. This is a big difference. So PIWIs, on the other side, usually have some kind of genetical relation to wines or varieties that are not belonging to the species of Vitis vinifera. So they might belong to, for example, Vitis amurensis, which is more like Asian varieties, or to Vitis labrusca, which is basically American varieties. And now the big question is, why do we create these PIWI varietals? Why do we try to create new varietals that have some either Asian or American genetic heritage? And the reason for this is simply to improve those grape varieties' resistance over for certain diseases. And one thing here is, of course, that with our European varieties, Vitis vinifera, that basically have been cultivated over like decades, if not centuries in some cases. Or most important reason, basically, that I have to remember is that most of the common diseases that we are working with, be it mildew, for example, as a very good example, are coming from the US. So those have been imported over the last 150 years due to globalization, and they have been diseases that actually have been not known to Vitis vinifera before a certain point in time. And therefore, it makes, from a genetical perspective, totally sense that we say, okay, let's take some of our very common and popular Vitis vinifera varieties and let's cross them with some other varieties that have, let's say, a genetic heritage to or relation to Vitis amurensis or Vitis labrusca, to get some of those like American or Asian genes into the new varieties that then hopefully have a higher resistance against these diseases that we get from outside Europe. And this is the whole idea behind PIWI varietals. And basically, like why do we do that? The idea is naturally that we try to reduce the amount of pesticides and the amounts of interventions per growing season that we need in order to protect our wines against these diseases. So this is where PIWIs are coming from. Now I hope you understood this concept. So they are not crossings, they are hybrids. They are usually based on a classic European variety crossed with something that has genetic relation to Asian or American varieties in order to increase their protection against certain diseases that were imported to Europe and not have been naturally present in Europe before a certain time.